Here's what southern Ontario on my way up to Tobermory looked like in September of 2013 from the car window. And here's what it would look like from the perspective of one of the local technology eschewing Amish. So what I'd like to know is this. If these guys are just Am-ish, if you're truly and devoutly Am, what do? Do you haul the horse around inside the buggy? Here I am in Dufferin, Ontario, which you can see behind me hosts part of the planet's grand propeller system, which of course keeps the Earth rotating. Right now the Earth is traveling at its normal speed, so there's no need for the propellers to be running at this particular time of day. Normally they'll run them at night so as not to disturb the local community, and that keeps the planet rotating and allows the normal day-night system. As you're probably aware, at certain times of the year they will back those propellers off to reset our clocks as they adjust the speed of the Earth rotation to either lengthen or shorten the duration of daytime or nighttime in order that we can enjoy the longer hours of daylight during the summer, and of course shortening that daylight when it gets cold. And that's how the Earth's rotation is regulated here in Dufferin, Ontario. And that's your Science Minute for today. Thank you. This is a red-breasted nuthatch. Well, actually, it's spelled nuthatch, but it should actually be pronounced nu-thatch, because of the bird's habit in the olden days of gathering nest-building materials from grass roofs that had been newly thatched. It builds a floating nest from the thatch and lives for 500 years, at which point it sets itself on fire and is reborn from the ashes. From this we get the expression, referring to useless enterprises, like carrying coals to new thatches, because a bird that can set itself on fire wouldn't need any fossil fuel. Well, it's about 13 kilometers to Tobermory. Hope to make it there by midday. We shall see. This is, of course, the town of Tobermory, which was founded as a pirate lair in the late 13th century by the two-fisted drunkard Captain Maurice du Bière, who was known by his English crewmen as Tobermory. He is buried on nearby Flowerpot Island, where his crewmen carved and erected a Pilsner glass-shaped monument in his honor. The tradition of piracy is continued, as in all tourist traps, by local shopkeepers who fleece visitors with $20 t-shirts, $5 greeting cards, and chunks of fudge that are sold for prices which in other locales would be sufficient to feed a small family for several days. Tobermory is situated at the northern tip of the Bruce Peninsula, which is named after Lenny the Bruce, an exiled court jester turned revolutionary, who, along with Guy Fawkes and his band of incendiary groundhog minions, led a rebellion and successfully undermined the King of Canada, both figuratively and literally, but more on that later. This is, of course, one of the famous Mississauga rattlesnakes, which are indigenous, endemic to this part of the world. They're relatively tame. Oh, Jesus Christ! In case you were worried. The snake's alright. And my hand has only swelled up to the size of a small basketball. There in the distance, you can see one of the famed antlerless Ontario moose. Now I'll try to draw it closer, because Ontario, relatively speaking, is so unpopulated. The moose here have a relative unfair. What's that mean? They are relatively unafraid. That's what I'm trying to say. They're relatively unafraid of humans. So I'm going to see if I can get this one to approach using my moose call. Here, moosey, moosey, moosey! Here, Moosey Moosey! Working great. I think you just can't hear me. Here we see a warning regarding one of the local First Nations, people known as the dog. They have not yet fully embraced civilized life as defined from a Eurocentric point of view, and they do occasionally still take white slaves to work in their casinos as blackjack dealers. I've come across this this large circular pit, which I believe is an ancient meteor crater, and that's my professional opinion from the circularity and depth of this formation, that it is most likely a meteor crater. Yeah, a meteor crater. It's a frontier watchtower, usually manned by a guardsman of the military to prevent incursions from the Dog Nation. But at the moment, the dog people have come to a temporary peace with the Dominion of Canada. Here we see an ancient Phoenician settlement established 3,000 years ago. Here you can see their dated mark indicating we were here 1,000 years before Jesus was born. These are orange tree otters, which survive by weaving small nets to catch flying fish coming in off the Georgian Bay. Here you can see some of the tree otter nets, which are constructed once again to catch flying fish coming in off of Georgian Bay. And the tree otters weave these from hairs from the manes of the antlerless Ontario moose, which we saw in an earlier clip. Here we see another old ruin. This is a structure that was built by the... Oops, one moment please. Sorry, that was a call coming in from the alien overlords indicating that I shouldn't reveal the origin of this structure. So I'm sorry, I won't be able to tell you about its establishment by extraterrestrial beings. Sorry. You can see here the these marks that have been left on trees through these flying fish flyways that appear in the forest, and these marks are a function of the diet of the orange tree otters that we saw previously, and because the flying fish contain such a high amount of protein, the tree otters produce quite a bit of uric acid in their excrement, and so this is basically tree otter excrement on the trees that you see here, which is useful because it comes in handy to here you see another one. It comes in handy to follow the trail through the flying fish flyways, which are relatively open due to the fact that the vegetation is kept down by the constant traffic of the flying fish. I'm surprised we haven't seen any today yet.
The ferocious freshwater penguin is one of the chief predators of the orange tree otter. This pair has been attracted by the fetid odor of otter guano, which has accumulated on its breeding lek. This lek would be covered in the spring with male otters, hoping to lure females to swim through the frigid water to their miniature island bachelor pad with their distinctive call, "Hey baby, hey baby, hey baby." As elsewhere along the Great Lakes, one needs to be careful that one does not get trapped on the shore between headlands when there is an incoming tide.
Well, I'm well off trail at a place called Cave Point, where I was hoping to find a large cavern decorated with Cro-Magnon magical symbols, but I think instead it's just called Cave Point because there's a lot of little tiny indentations. And the way ahead is fairly precarious, so I think that I will take the recommendation of our search and rescue group and not travel off trail alone when people don't know where you are. Well, I have in fact found the cave with the magical Cro-Magnon symbols. There, you can see them there. I'm fairly certain that those are ancient markings having something to do with ancient fertility rites.
This cave was probably occupied for thousands, if not tens of thousands of years, by successive generations of Neanderthals, and later Cro-Magnon humans seeking refuge from the harsh conditions of the Ice Age.
We can see one of the many fault lines evident in the area, this being a national park. This is everybody's fault, or nobody's fault, depending on how you want to look at it. Here we see a white birch, and these trees are rather delicate and require quite a bit of maintenance. They are actually, the covering is actually the skin of discarded canoes, which the park personnel use to cover these trees, which otherwise would not survive, which is, as you'd imagine, quite a bit of work. And here you can see the offspring, smaller offspring of one of these trees. That's the so-called son of a birch, which is an exclamation that the parks people use as an expletive because of the difficulty of having to come out here each year and covering these birch with discarded canoe skins. Don't know if you can hear that, but that is a trembling aspen. Scientific name is Populus deltoides, which means popular deltoids, because the smooth bark feels like a solidly muscled arm, which makes the males of this tree particularly popular with the females of the tree. Yeah, Populus deltoides. This is, of course, the common grebe, the natural enemy of the orange tree otter. They're called grebes because they'll fly through the forest and grebe the little tree otters right out of the trees. Yeah. A grebe. Yep.
These are some of the crumbling ruins often seen in farmers' fields, where stones from Wyerton Castle have been salvaged to build boundary walls. These collapsed passageways and overgrown ramparts are all that is left of over 30 kilometers of seawall that formed part of the fortification system constructed in the 10th century by King Horton, who padded his treasury with the income generated by the trade in caffeinated beverages and fried bannock, to which his subjects were addicted. It is said that the devil offered to construct the entire series of battlements in a single night. However, his demands for double-time pay and a dental care plan resulted in a protracted labor dispute, ending in an owner's lockout, and eventually the battlements were completed by non-union conscripted native workmen. The ramparts protected the royal trade routes from naval attack and became known as the Canadian Shield. These hidey holes and hidden passages are testament to the fact that long after the overthrow of King Horton's dynasty, the abandoned fortresses were used as part of the Underground Railroad as transfer points for slaves fleeing from the United States, the so-called Niagara Escapement. Artifacts from the area are highly prized, and by coincidence I caught this shifty character scoping out the scene in an attempt to smuggle one of the abandoned bastion towers out of the country. He was, however, quickly apprehended by an undercover agent of the Antiquities Protection Section of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, seen here phoning her horse for backup to take the culprit into custody.
As you can see, Wyerton Willie remains one of the most revered of Canadian icons, owing to his great contributions to establishing the country. We still celebrate National Marmot Day, Groundhog Day, on February 2nd. Much like in England, a Canadian groundhog herder is celebrated on Guy Fawkes Day. Guy Fawkes was a famous Canadian groundhog herder who traveled to England to serve in a resistance movement there, and actually wound up being killed when all of his incendiary groundhogs burst into flame at once. It's very sad. Well, here's the cage of Wyerton Willie, one of the more famous groundhogs, what we call in British Columbia marmots. Marmot being an abbreviation for mammal at arms, master of tunneling, because marmots in the Middle Ages here in Ontario were used as assistance in warfare to tunnel beneath the battlements of castles, at which point, when they had tunneled sufficiently deeply, they were called back to base, set on fire, and sent back down to the tunnels to collapse the battlements and set them ablaze. Marmots, mammal at arms, master of tunneling. This is a monument to the noble Wyerton Willie, whose ancestors were responsible for felling the castle of the King of Canada in 1272 during the famous Battle of Wyerton, after which Canada was freed to pursue a model of democracy.
Although most people believe that the national animal of Canada is the beaver, for which its nobler cousin the groundhog is often mistaken, Wyerton Willie, we salute you. The Grotto is one of the highlights of the Bruce Peninsula National Park. This underwater cave was blasted out of the rock by a natural explosion of atomic fusion owing to the high quantities of uranium. The Georgian Bay is essentially a large cove of Lake Huron, after which the element uranium is named, because of its prevalence in the area. Inside the grotto, the water glows a beautiful blue color due to the phenomenon known as Cherenkov radiation. These tiny mutant minnows are one of several exotic species that have evolved here. The fish have no mouths and derive all the energy for their metabolic needs from the Cherenkov radiation. The radiation they absorb is so intense and concentrated that they have been collected by the military for use as weapons-grade fissile material. The rockets utilizing such warheads are the Minotaur missiles, developed at the turn of the new millennium. The natural nuclear blast that created the grotto also traveled outwards into the bay, creating a short tunnel about 15 feet deep and twice that distance in length, through which one can swim underwater into the open waters of Georgian Bay. The main picture shows what it is like to wait for someone who is making the transit out and back. Such a dive should only be attempted by someone with good aerobic capacity and a high tolerance for intense nuclear radiation, or whose brain is already so compromised that hypoxia and gamma rays will not cause any further damage. The inset shows an underwater view. The mermaid is doubtless a figment of the imagination caused by oxygen deprivation during the dive. After all, such creatures apparently have no means of eliminating bodily waste or to breed. Evolutionarily, not a body template destined to last through many generations. For these reasons, Great Lake sirens are very rare, but are docile and easily caught when encountered. Of course, someone lucky enough to catch one will be granted the prospect of a fine dinner, as merpersons are delicious when sautéed with garlic and herbs. Further contributing to the rarity of the Great Lakes siren is the well-known fact that they are frequently mistaken for seals with seaweed draped over their heads, and thus are indiscriminately slaughtered during the annual baby seal clubbing in which all Canadians gleefully participate. In fact, the diver featured here was also mistaken for a large, fat, white baby seal, and was bludgeoned to death shortly after this filming to be made into some fine trimming for a Salvation Army Santa costume. If you would like to donate to ensure the continuance of the great baby seal harvest, you obviously have too much money and should be sending it instead to the email address listed in the nav bar for beesforbabar.org. That's bees as in the insect, the preposition for, and barbar as in the elephant, .org. All one word, beesforbabar.org.
Well done.